The elders of Jaden Rafi often said that life does not shout when it is about to change. It whispers, barely audible to those who are too busy or too loud to listen. Amina had heard the whisper for the first time on the morning her mother did not rise from her mat. The sun had barely stretched its light across the compound when Amina noticed the silence. Zainab, her mother, was usually awake before the rooster, humming old songs as she swept the yard. That morning, there was no humming, only shallow breaths and eyes that seemed to look far beyond the walls of their small home. By noon, neighbors had gathered, their quiet faces murmuring concern. By evening, the village healer had shaken his head, offering no words of hope. And by nightfall, Amina understood something she had long avoided: poverty is not loud, but patient. It waits, weakens, and then it takes. When her mother died 2 days later, Amina did not scream. She washed the body with trembling hands, wrapped her in white cloth, and watched as the earth received her. The final sigh pressed down, heavy not only with grief but with responsibility. Amina was 24, unmarried, and suddenly the head of a household that included 2 younger siblings who still believed the world could be kind. Kindness, she had learned, was a choice, and many chose otherwise. The days after the morning were harsh and unrelenting. The small tailoring shop where she worked barely paid enough to keep hunger at bay. School fees waited, the landlord's messages grew sharper, and relatives who once praised her now spoke in lowered voices about her future. She is hardworking, they said. But hard work alone does not feed mouths. It was then that the first path appeared. Hassan, a respected businessman, old enough to be her father, generous with smiles and careful words, offered help. Money for food, support for schooling, protection from eviction. Amina listened to him that evening in his car, hearing his concern but feeling the weight of the unspoken conditions. She understood without being told. Relief came with a price, and she was not yet ready to pay it. That night, she lay awake listening to her siblings breathe, torn between shame and relief. This path was smooth and well-lit, approved by many who would never walk it themselves. The second path was quieter. It appeared in exhaustion, in late hours at the shop, in rejected applications and unanswered letters. It offered no promise, only effort and uncertainty. Sometimes, she hated it. It demanded everything she had and returned little. It cared nothing for hunger or grief, it simply waited. The village watched her struggle, some offering gentle encouragement, others whispering warnings behind closed doors. Life is already hard, one neighbor said. Why refuse help when it comes? Others muttered, a woman who takes shortcuts often forgets where she was going. Amina said little. She smiled when required, walked when needed, and held within her a restless voice that refused to be silenced. One evening, while delivering clothes to a customer, she met Sadiq, a former schoolmate now running a small printing business. They spoke awkwardly at first, then with the ease of shared memory. When he asked about her family, she told the truth, with no embellishment and no appeal. I'm trying, she said simply. Sadiq nodded. Trying is not small. He offered her part-time work, typing, organizing, learning basic accounts. Modest pay, long hours, honest work. That night, standing alone under the moon her mother had once admired, Amina felt the weight of the 2 paths before her. One promised immediate solutions, the other would test her until she either broke or grew stronger. She closed her eyes and took a step, not knowing where it would lead, but certain of who she wanted to remain. Somewhere in the quiet of Jaden Rafi, the elder's words returned to her, not as warning, but as truth. Life whispers. Only those who listen understand. The following days brought no miracles. Each morning, she woke before the sun, prepared food, walked long distances between the tailoring shop and Sadiq's office. Her fingers cramped, her feet ached, her sleep was thin, but she continued. She reminded herself that dignity, like cloth, must be stretched carefully or it tears. At the printing shop, Numbers began to make sense, records stopped frightening her, and for the first time, she felt the slow confidence that comes from progress earned rather than gifts received. Hossein did not disappear. His messages returned, polite at first, then persistent. Opportunities he offered required no struggle, no patience, but they demanded surrender of her pride. "You are choosing hardship," he said one afternoon near the market. "Life does not reward stubbornness." She thanked him and walked away, yet his words followed her like dust, reminding her that society's idea of success was often a test of character more than of circumstance. Pressure came in other forms. An aunt visited unannounced, listing examples of women who had secured their future wisely. "No one eats principles," she said flatly. "Do you think your mother would want this struggle for you?" That night, Amina cried quietly, careful not to wake her siblings. She questioned herself in a way no enemy could. Was she brave or foolish? Noble or punished? The longer path asked everything, and gave nothing in return but the slow shaping of a strong heart. Consequences arrived before comfort. At the tailoring shop, money went missing. Amina was accused of theft, dismissed without pay or apology. Hunger spoke loudly in the following days. Her siblings noticed thinner portions and her first smiles began to crack. Hossein heard before she could, arriving calmly that evening. "You see," he said gently. "The world is not kind to those who refuse help." The well-paved path stood before her, warm and inviting, demanding only that she close her eyes and step forward. Amina asked for time. She walked through the village that night, the cool air brushing her face, thinking of her mother's rough, honest hands and her old wisdom. Ease without peace is still a form of suffering. The next morning, she returned to Sadiq and spoke her truth, without pleading or excuses. He listened in silence. "You don't owe me explanations," he said finally. "But if you're willing to learn more, I'm willing to teach." He increased her responsibilities. Not out of pity, but trust. Mistakes would embarrass her, lessons would humble her, but slowly, something shifted. Weeks turned to months. Amina stood straighter, her siblings laughed more, the landlord's voice softened. She was tired, but no longer desperate. Hossein stopped calling, not because temptation vanished, but because her repeated choices had already defined her. One evening, as she locked up the office, Amina realized that the longer path had not changed her life overnight, but it had changed her. Years reveal what days hide. Her small printing business grew from a single aging machine to a modest workspace serving schools, traders, and the community. Sadiq trusted her with real decisions, and she managed accounts, negotiated prices, and trained younger workers who reminded her of herself in the uncertain days. The girl who once counted coins before sleeping now counted possibilities. Her siblings finished school, not without struggle, but without shame. They watched Amina refuse shortcuts repeatedly, and without realizing it, they absorbed the lesson. Not everyone approved. Some relatives tried to rewrite history, speaking as though they had always supported her, while others approached with rehearsed praise. Amina listened politely. Growth had taught her that peace often requires selective hearing. Months passed, and life continued to test Amina in ways that left her both exhausted and quietly proud. Every morning, she rose before the sun, prepared meals, and walked the dusty paths between her home, the printing shop, and errands for her siblings. Her body ached, but she felt a subtle shift inside, a growing resilience she could not have predicted. The quiet satisfaction of earned progress became her companion, a whisper of hope against the persistent noise of doubt and judgment. Hossein did not vanish completely. Occasionally, his presence returned in the form of messages and unexpected visits. He spoke of opportunity, of doors that opened without struggle, and of a life made easier if she only surrendered the burdens she carried herself. The temptation was subtle, wrapped in care and generosity, but Amina could feel the weight it demanded. She knew that to accept it would be to trade her independence for relief, her dignity for comfort. And she was not ready to surrender either, Sadiq watched quietly, offering guidance when needed but never rushing her or shielding her from the consequences of her choices. It was in these small, often invisible lessons that Amina learned the depth of trust and the value of patience. One afternoon, as she reconciled invoices and organized orders, she realized that the work which had once felt like punishment now brought clarity. Her mind could anticipate problems before they arose. And she began mentoring younger employees with the patience and understanding she had long sought from others. Still, life was relentless. One day, news reached her that her younger brother had fallen ill. The medical bills were immediate and pressing, and Amina felt a sharp sting of fear. The easy path called to her louder than ever. Her son's name echoed in her mind, his offer of help a balm for the ache in her chest. Yet, she remembered her mother's words, "Ease without peace is still suffering." With trembling hands and determination in her heart, she walked to the clinic, borrowing a modest sum from a local friend, arranging small repayment plans, and managing to care for her brother without surrendering her principles. The village observed her closely, some offering praise, others muttering disapproval. "Why refuse ease?" they asked, curiosity and judgment intertwined. But Amina had learned to listen selectively. She could hear the whispers of life, the subtle instructions that guided her beyond the clamor of well-meaning advice. Each decision, each small act of perseverance, shaped her in ways that immediate comfort never could. Challenges came not only in life's practicalities but in its subtle test of character. A client at the printing shop attempted to manipulate her into delivering work without fair payment. She felt the familiar pull of surrender, the temptation to accept less and avoid conflict. Yet, she remembered the lessons of months past, the dignity of standing firm, the quiet power of integrity. She confronted the client, negotiated terms with courage, and secured fair compensation. Though it strained her nerves, she felt a deep satisfaction that no quick solution could replicate. Even as Amina navigated these struggles, she noticed the growing respect of her siblings. They observed her patience, her refusal to compromise self-respect, and the gentle way she carried the weight of responsibility. In quiet moments, they would ask her questions, seeking guidance not only for material survival but for the subtleties of character. And in these moments, Amina realized that the impact of her choices extended beyond herself. The longer path she had chosen was teaching not only resilience but a kind of wisdom that could ripple through generations. Her son's persistence continued, though his approach softened. He praised her accomplishments, spoke of partnership and opportunity, and subtly reminded her of the ease she had once refused. But Amina had grown. She listened politely, weighed his words, and declined with clarity and confidence. There was no anger in her refusal, only a quiet understanding that her worth was not for sale. As the months turned into a year, the printing business flourished beyond her early expectations. Sadiq entrusted her with greater responsibilities, and she managed finances, negotiated contracts, and trained new staff with precision and care. The girl who had once counted coins now counted possibilities, and each small victory reinforced her belief in the value of persistence. Yet, life's tests were far from over. A local festival brought relatives and villagers together, and with it, subtle comparisons and judgments. Some relatives openly admired her work ethic, while others whispered about the sacrifices she had made unnecessarily. Amina listened, acknowledged the praise, and ignored the murmurs of disapproval. She had learned that peace often required selective hearing, and she had learned how to protect it. One evening, as she walked home from the printing shop, she reflected on the journey so far. The path she had chosen had been steep, lonely, and exhausting, yet it had built within her a strength she could feel in her bones. She understood, finally, that the true reward of patience was not comfort but character, not wealth but the quiet power of knowing she had remained faithful to her principles. Amina's siblings, once dependent and uncertain, were now more confident and self-reliant. They observed their sister's integrity and resilience and began to carry those lessons into their own lives. The village, too, began to notice her transformation, though many could not articulate what had changed. It was not riches that set her apart, nor a loud declaration of success, but the steady, unshakable presence of someone who had learned to listen to life's whispers and respond with courage. Even Hossein, who had once represented the allure of immediate ease, seemed to sense the change.